Brian, appreciate your time today from Exceed Cybersecurity and IT Services. We're excited to have a conversation with you for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So, if you don't mind, can you kind of describe the core services that you offer and who your typical clients are?
Yeah, sure. The core services we offer is that we tend to help customers with cybersecurity risk assessments. So what that means is we help them identify and establish their risk exposure, the risk position, if you will, by doing some risk assessment on them, which is a proprietary process we created. And then we help them understand kind of like how they can manage that risk going forward. And what we found foundationally is that most of our prospects and clients, they've never really thought of it that way, right? They don't really know what the risk is. They tend to believe that their IT person, IT company, maybe their in-house IT team is handling all the cybersecurity risks, and that's generally just not the case because it's a very different type of discipline, right? Is it doing information and data security versus just day-to-day IT management of assets, email, help desk, things like that, right? It's a different world. So we help clients understand the risk exposure. We help them then also manage that risk going forward we have different security plans. We have something for every budget. Depends on how deep they want to get into it and sort of what their budget allows for. We always kind of recommend at least sort of a stepped approach, right? Start with something, right? Something is better than nothing today because you don't want to be fully exposed. And by the way, a little bit of word for the wise. A lot of folks, tend to believe that smaller businesses, probably a lot of your clients, right? They tend to think that, hey, I'm not a big company. What do I have to get? And the answer is a lot. You have a lot of data that can be taken, that can be ransomed. We'll talk about that later. Or they can have very easy access and easy pickings, the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, maybe to your bank accounts, right? This is all financially motivated generally. So anyway, we recommend that clients get into some sort of a security plan. And then lastly, we also help customers who have compliance requirements, whether it's through a contract, whether it's through regulation or whether it's legal related. We help them put in place a compliance program that they may have tried to establish before, maybe they haven't. Some examples of that may be something like CIS version 8.1. These are general cybersecurity framework controls that kind of apply to any business. But as far as compliance goes, one that's very, very, there's a lot of information about it now, is for defense contractors, U.S. defense contractors, called CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. We help businesses like that get ready for the certification and their audit. And there's others like that too, like GDPR for anyone that does business in the European Union, or other types of HIPAA is another type of compliance or conformance regime, for example. So that's
Okay.
a bit of a lot, but hopefully a little more context. So it's not just
Yeah.
about what we do, but also why we do it and how it helps the customer.
Yeah. Excellent. So you've done that, I'm sure you've had those conversations with those prospective clients, and much like us, we have prospective client calls to see if it's going to be a good fit. Once
Mhm.
you've determined, it's going to be a good fit for not only you, but also the customer, what's that onboarding process look like when they've signed on to work with Exceed Cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's a very defined process. We're very much a big part of our culture is communication. It's kind of an extension of who I am because I'm a very strong communicator, or at least I believe I am. So, and we're always about improving things as well. But first of all, we have processes very well documented, and we're always improving and getting better. We believe in the concept of Kaizen, which is a Japanese principle around continuous process improvement, right? So we're big believers in that. But as far as the onboarding process goes, it's very simple. Let's say we work together, we do a risk assessment, you like what we do or like what we kind of propose, you sign an agreement with us, and then we onboard you. And that process is usually between about 30 and 90 days, depending on what services you're needing from us. And those are kind of too numerous to get into detail now because we don't have the time for that. But usually between a 30 and 90-day time window, we tend to onboard you. Now, it also depends on whether you are looking for just defensive cybersecurity services, or if you also want us to replace your IT company. May or may not be the case. But by the way, we can work very well alongside an IT company that may not be very strong in security. So we can work right alongside them and be in our swim lane. We can also, again, do the compliance work as well. But generally, we have very specific processes we follow. We've got SOPs that are all staged out, and we want to be very strongly and clearly communicating to our customer that what's going to happen. We're not going to put anything in jeopardy. If there's anything that requires a little more hand holding, we slow down. We may have a meeting with the customer, maybe with the executives, and say, okay, here's what to expect in the next step, and so on. But our communication is ongoing, right? We actually continuously work with our clients and we do what we call technology business reviews. If they're really large customers, they may be monthly. Some of them are quarterly, some are semi-annual. So onboarding is kind of really, I mean, there's a point where you hit critical mass, of course, right? But really the communication never stops because we're always looking for better opportunities, for them to improve and to increase and improve their security posture.
Yeah. And just like insurance, things change. So you want to make sure, even annually, I'm sure you're doing reviews with them to make sure they're all up to date. So
More than annual for sure. Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
absolutely. Most of them we meet with them on a quarterly basis.
Okay, great. Okay. So talk to me, you mentioned you're at, small businesses. That's the number one, rebuttal we get. Well, I'm just a small business. No one's gonna come after me.
Yeah.
But there's obviously several different ways that, larger small businesses can be impacted. Talk to us a little bit about cyber extortion and ransomware. What is ransomware and what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, great question. So ransomware, first of all, is when just make it very simple. It's when an external unauthorized party, we'll call them the hacker, right? Usually, by the way, they're cyber crime gangs or criminal organizations that are typically beyond the reach of US law, right? They're somewhere in Eastern Europe or another country, another place outside of the US reach. And those are typically very well organized gangs that have a whole bunch of people like staff working for them that are looking for this low hanging fruit. And one of them may be where they find an entry into your network or into your data systems, into your file system, whether that be on site on a server, whether it's on a computer in your office, or whether that's in the cloud. Cloud is a little bit different as far as ransomware goes, but let's assume you have data on your network and you maybe click an email, you click let's say a phishing link, but don't identify the fact that it was a phishing link because maybe your team wasn't trained, right? They don't know how to identify those or how to maybe report them or not click on a phishing link, for example. And now they may download a piece of malicious software, or malware, right? And that piece of software may it's going to do its best to essentially create what's called a foothold, which essentially sort of clawing or clamoring into your computer. And then typically what they'll do is if they can get what's called a foothold on your computer, they do what's called they traverse the network, which is called lateral movement across the network. And then they're looking for, you have the bad guys that have sort of visibility into your network, into your computers, your files, your servers, and so on. And now they're looking for anything that's of value, right? They may just assume, well, anything that you use on your server is of value. And now they're going to be in your server because they made those lateral movements. And now they can run this program that's going to lock down and what's called encrypt your files. So encryption basically means, you've probably heard of encryption before. It's essentially where they lock up your files with a special key that only they have. And
Mm,
that data then becomes unreadable, unusable, really. And at that point, you're kind of hosed unless you have really, really good backups that are maybe offsite somewhere, what are called air gapped, which is separated from your network entirely, right? But effectively, those guys now want you to pay them for the unlock key. So like, hey, we just ruined your life, but we can save you, right?
yeah,
And so they're the disease and the cure. So look at it that way.
yeah.
That's what ransomware is. And the extortion types we're seeing are varied, but I'll tell you the most common ones we see today are what's called the extortion, and it's essentially the ransomware and then the double extortion. And that is that they'll lock up your files and say, pay us now. And you're like, you know what? Go take a long walk off of a short pier. That's like an old phrase right there. Take a long walk off of a short pier. I've got backups. You're like, haha, not so fast. Now comes the blackmail part where they say,
Mm,
if you don't pay us $50,000, 250,000, whatever the number is they deem worthy, if you don't pay us, we're going to release all your files on the dark web, which is sort of an underground black market, sort of like a digital Silk Road.
yeah.
And we'll release all your files in the black market and it's going to all be exposed and you're going to be screwed. So you better pay us or else. So that's called double extortion.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm sure maybe you've gotten them, maybe you've not. I know I've certainly gotten the notices, that my information could potentially be out there on the dark web from a variety of, services that I use personally. So
Mhm.
it's definitely out there. One of the things you mentioned, kind of getting access to the systems and the servers and seeing what's out there. One of the big things that we talk to all our customers, because again, you mentioned everyone thinks, oh, well, it's not going to happen to me because I'm just a, small business, but
Yeah.
every business has money, talk
Yep.
to us a little bit about like those misdirected payment fraud cases that you've seen or
Mm.
maybe experienced with a small business and they thought they were protected and now they just wrote a check to one of their clients that really wasn't one of their clients.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I'm sure in your line of business in the insurance world, you see this a ton, I'm sure, right? So yeah, that's like the probably the most common scourge these days. Like maybe a couple, 2, 3, 4 years ago, it was more ransomware. You saw more of that. You still see the double extortion that happening as well. But what the bad guys are doing now is that they're getting pretty crafty, and they figured out that your users, your people, are your weakest link. We kind of know that, right? That's just kind of be fair. Your users are your weakest link. They generally know if you're a small business, let's say 10, 20, 30, 50 people, it doesn't really matter. But if you don't have a training program, they don't know how to spot this stuff, right? And that's how it begins with what's called a social engineering email attack, which is called phishing, right? Phishing, phishing.
Hmm.
And so that's a type of social engineering attack where the sender tries to get you to do something, right? It looks like a legitimate email. And now you click on that. And now perhaps what happens is that they, through a series of processes, which I won't get into the details, the bad guy now has control of your email. Okay. So now this is where things really go sideways. All right. So now they have control of your email. So now imagine this is your accounts payable or accounts receivable person. Think about what can happen here. You have the bad guy that's essentially sort of an intermediary that's monitoring all the communications back and forth. And guess what they do all the time? They take those emails, they reroute them, they delete them, they move them to a folder before you ever see it in your Outlook or your
Mm.
email, whatever it is. And they now are changing communication saying, oh, by the way, you're about to wire us this money. Our ACH or wire information has changed. Now use this, right?
Mm.
A lot of people are aware of these wire fraud schemes or ACH fraud, right? ACH is bank to bank transfer, by the way, and wire is faster but worse because it's almost irretrievable. But there's ways to get money back, by the way. There's ways clawing it back, but that's another story. So that's what's happening is that you have somebody whose email was compromised. It's called a business email compromise or a BEC. That person is now being used to intercept communications and now either from the sender side, say funnel money here, or maybe the money is being pulled from that end. It could be either side, right? Because you have to figure out who got compromised. Which side was it? Was it
Yeah.
the payor? Was it the payee? Who's at fault, right? And this can create some nasty, nasty disputes between firms. It's like, I sent you the 100 grand for that, but you, blah, 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 you were compromised, you got hacked. And so they can get into fights themselves because who's liable? So it
Right.
creates a whole other Pandora's box along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, I will admit, I have fallen victim to the internal trainings of we're going to send out these phishing emails.
Mhm.
So they can be very deceptive.
Oh, yeah.
And I happened to click on it, in a previous role, previous life. And not long after that, I actually interviewed for a job in IT with the person who headed up like the cybersecurity area. And I was like, ooh, I gotta come clean. I clicked on that email because I wasn't sure if they were gonna, use that against me in the interview process. Was like, I gotta come clean. I was like, yep, I fell for it and trained on it. Did the training, so they are very easy to be deceived by. So awesome. So you talked a little bit about the phishing. I think that's the big
Mhm.
one, right? The social
And,
engineering. There's
and by the way,
phishing.
real quick, Jason, honesty is the best policy.
Yeah.
Because think about this. We've all known people in life that have been liars and not very honest. Think about all the lies you have to remember because they're not true. Think
Oh
about all
yeah.
that. Honesty is the best policy.
Oh
Just
yeah.
admit it. I screwed up.
Yep.
Go on.
Yeah. So yeah, phishing emails, they can be, fortunately it was the internal one. So when I clicked on it, all it was a big fish with a hook in its mouth. I was like, yeah, that's me. You got me.
You got
Um,
reeled in. Yeah.
but so yeah, so phishing, obviously I'm aware of smishing,
Yep.
with the
Text
texting.
phishing.
What are
Yep.
some of the other kind of social engineering tactics that are out there that may not be as common as, the email compromise or the text compromise, especially with AI now?
Oh, yeah, that's a really great lead in. So, one of them that's super common these days, that's affecting a lot of people, is what's called vishing, which is voice phishing, right? And these days, think about it. You can just download simple tools and actually use an AI voice generator, right? To where you're, let's say, typing in words or whatever you're talking to through a system. Let's say it's what's called a soft phone, like a digital telephone, and you're talking to somebody at the other end, and it sounds just like maybe the boss or the CEO of the company. Hey Martha,
Hmm.
it's John, blah 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 blah, whatever. You can tell them whatever you want, and then it's going to sound like that person. And now with AI, it's made it virtually indistinguishable. If they have a sample of, let's say John, the CEO's, or let's say John's the CEO, right? Of John's recording, that hacker can call in there. They can spoof or what's called mimic the telephone number, and they can mimic the voice, right? And now Martha, who's an accounts payable, what is she to do? And when John, right, says, "Hey, I want you to go ahead and go out there and buy 50 Apple gift cards or whatever, Amazon or something like that, Visa Cash, right? Cash cards and do all this." That's kind of small potatoes too. Or it may be like, "I want you to wire 50,000 to this bank account."
Yeah.
And so that's where it gets really tricky because at this point, whose responsibility is it to make sure
Yeah.
that these problems are headed off, right? I mean, training is a big one of them, but you should probably also have policies in place. You should have procedures around this, technical controls, because it is the Wild West right now. And everybody, you may think that your team is really, really smart. I've heard that a lot. Oh, my team doesn't click on that. I will prove to you 10 ways but from Sunday that they do,
Yeah.
right? And do not rest on your laurels because it's going to be a really bad day, maybe a bad year. And if it's really bad, let's say they lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. Can a business survive that?
Right.
Right? This could be business ending problems. And this is not hyperbole. Business
Right.
ending. It's that bad for some companies.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, and it does. It kind of comes down to, you said, the number one risk with that is the human exposure. So, with your clients, when you work with them, you said,
Mhm.
like you said, 10 ways to Sunday, you can show them that their folks will click on that link or they will click on that attachment. How does the human factor play into that part with the culture of the business owner? And what services do you provide in terms of like maybe training, or does your organization do those kind of like phishing, schemes to prove, not prove, but to kind of like make your customers aware that, hey, this is an opportunity for us to train, your employees.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the short answer is absolutely. That's actually a core part of our lowest level plan, our basic cybersecurity plan. So we include the end user cybersecurity awareness training, what's called CSAT, which is not the same as customer service. What is there's a CSAT score, customer satisfaction, right? Different
Okay.
acronym, same acronym, different definition. But cybersecurity awareness training is a core component, and really we felt was so foundational to security, which is training your team to spot problems, right? So that
Yeah.
training is one part of it, right? So that's half of it. And it can't just be an annual, a one and done generally, or even an annual. It has to be ongoing because these guys, the bad guys, think about it. These guys are smart. They're not dumb, right?
Hmm.
They're always figuring out, they're always iterating, right? Think about that. They're always doing Kaizen too, continuous process improvement. They're figuring out better ways to scam you. So your team has to be on top of that. And frankly, in my opinion, my not so humble opinion, my belief is that you as a business owner, if I'm speaking to the owner right now, you as a business owner really need to take that seriously to make sure your team is A, trained or one, trained, and two, is being tested. So that's where those fake phishing emails come into
Hmm.
play and seeing whether Sally from accounting or Bob from receiving, whomever, some are more important than others, right? Different positions. Some may have the keys to the kingdom for the bank, but making sure that they're trained continuously, not just annually, but ongoing, and that they're tested as well. And what we found works super well is gamifying the process.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean by that?
I
Do you
do.
want me to?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you
Yeah.
say, hey, listen, we're doing our cybersecurity awareness training. Whoever gets the best score this month is going to get a $50 Amazon, whatever, some gift card, right? Some kind of incentive to really make it fun and engaging for your team where it's a little friendly competition. Who doesn't love friendly competition?
Yeah.
Right? So make it
Yeah.
fun, make it interesting, and that way it's not doesn't feel like a chore, like, oh, I got to do this thing again. Like, no, I want to beat my friend here, right? Because
Yep.
I know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. I'm gonna kill it. So that's how you really get people engaged and involved in that. And that way, everybody owns the risk, not just you as the owner. They're all helping. You're rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. Awesome. So you do all that, we hope everyone, follows through with the training and does their best, takes their best measures to avoid those types of things. But we all know, like I said, I was guilty of it once, clicking on a phishing email. I can tell you anything suspicious now gets sent to our IT team to say, can you check this out before I open it? But obviously it happens. So in
Sure.
your experience, how does insurance kind of align with your services that you provide? Specifically, some of the things we kind of like to hear about, we hear like, the IT reviews that have to get done, the incident investigation, and then
Mhm.
lastly, right, you go through all this and it's like your reputation is tarnished. So kind of talk about your services, how they align in conjunction with insurance that's available and kind of
Yeah.
that process. They click the thing, the payment was made, or something was, taken control.
Mhm.
What are your services? And kind of talk through that.
Sure. And we can probably talk about this topic for an hour. I mean, easily, right? I can talk to you about this for a long time because I have a lot of experience in talking with insurance agents and clients and kind of helping this. But think of this look at this through the lens of risk management. Because really the first thing you have to do is identify your risk foundationally, right? Create a baseline. That's where the risk assessment comes in place. That's where it comes into view, right? The risk assessment. So foundational baseline, right? Then what you really want to do, in my opinion, is then sort of start putting in some protections, some controls, putting in policies and procedures, putting in multi-factor authentication across the board, making sure that you have cybersecurity awareness training, using password managers so you don't keep reusing those same passwords. By the way, that's the number one way that people get compromised through password
Hmm.
reuse. So those are foundational for us, right? And so let's assume you start with that. What you really want to do, what we do is we talk to our clients about, look, we need to create alignment between what we're doing for you and what your cyber insurance policy actually says, your cyber liability policy. Because sometimes, as you know, it's baked in as what's called I call it there's a word for it. So not a rider, there's a word for it, another word.
An endorsement?
An endorsement, that's the word. Thank you.
Yes.
So oftentimes it's an endorsement. Most companies don't have what's called a standalone cyber liability policy, which frankly is way better. It's a higher premium, but it also has better coverage as well. So we talk to our clients about that extremely openly. But we do want to make sure we review their cyber policy, whether it's an endorsement on a business E&O, an umbrella insurance policy, or a technical policy, whatever coverage they have, and make sure that their application where they said we have this or we don't have that, yes or no, that's actually true, right?
Yeah.
Because here's where the rubber meets the road, Jason. I'm just going to preach in the choir here. You know this, but your audience may not, and that's this. Whatever you checked in your application, when you do, not if, but when you have a cyber incident, that means a breach, something was stolen or money was taken, guess what? When you file a claim through your broker with your insurance carrier, what are they going to do?
Oh,
They're
they're
going to
pulling that
invest
application.
they're going to investigate, and part of that process is they pull the application. If they find that the bad guys got in because you didn't do something you claimed to do, there's a high probability your claim will be denied by the carrier.
Hmm. Yeah.
So what I say, the example I use, and this is meant to be a little tongue in cheek, slightly funny, but there's truth to that, which is your cyber liability policy to me is your final safety net. Okay. But the safety net does not work when it's on the ground.
Right.
Okay. When it's on the ground, you're done, right? So making sure that you're coordinating with your IT or security team and your insurance broker to make sure that everyone's aligned, right? You have the right coverage, you're reviewing coverage. Um, and you also have coverage for all those different ways in which you could be damaged. You talked about reputation earlier, right? Let's say your data gets out and all your client list gets out, and now your reputation is tarnished. Do you have insurance for that? Does your current policy cover that? It might not. Do you have crime insurance if it's deemed to be a criminal act? Do you have crime insurance to cover that? There's a lot of things we can talk about here. Again, it's a longer topic, but
Yeah.
high level, that's kind of how we engage with our clients in that realm.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And that's, and I think that's why sometimes insurance kind of gets, can get a bad rap, right? Because everyone thinks, the claim that got denied is the story that you always hear. And that's why even on our end, we're the insurance professionals and it's certainly a policy that we can provide and coverage that we can talk to. But even for us, when our customers are like, well, what does this mean? We're like, this is a conversation you really need to have with your IT team because while we understand the policy, we may not understand the intricacies of the practices that you have in place.
Yep.
And you really need to speak to your IT team to determine whether or not this is how you should or shouldn't answer the question. Because we don't know that, right? That's why we're insurance professionals and why you're the cybersecurity professionals. You can speak more intelligently to that. So,
One
um,
more thing to add real quick on that side. We talked about sort of wire fraud, financial, that kind of theft essentially, right? Whether it's bank to bank, ACH theft, wire, whatever. keep in mind that those things are always, whatever these bad guys are doing, it's always financially motivated. It's very rarely industrial espionage where they're trying to steal information from you because they want your
Hmm.
information purely. They want to monetize it. It's all about that. So when they ransom you or they extort you, they want money from you. When they steal money from your bank account, clearly they want your money because that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
There are mechanisms you can employ. Talk to your bank. There's things like dual control, separation of duties, and all
Okay.
these mechanisms you can turn on your bank accounts to limit your risk financially to make sure that any kind of outbound money getting sucked out is actually evaluated. Was it the right person? But again, this is a set of processes and controls. These are financial controls that you can implement internally as far as checklists go, and your bank can work with you as well. Most banks can help you with that. So we can limit your risk on that side too. So it's not just one-sided. But
Yeah.
policies, procedures, practices equals controls, and then financial controls as well, all work together, and the insurance policy kind of undergirds it all.
Yeah. Awesome. But one last question. I know you touched on it a couple times already, and I'll repeat it. It's not if, it's when. But what advice do you have for those business owners, large or small, that think this isn't going to happen to me?
Well, you know what I'm going to say here. The ones that say it isn't going to happen to me are the ones who are not implementing protections. Because it's
Hmm.
just it's really what it is, and I'm not trying to speak ill of anyone here. I'm not personally trying to attack anyone, but it's a mindset. It's not going to happen to me. I'm too small. I have nothing to take, or whatever it might be, and those consistently prove to be wrong because it's those organizations that are less likely or almost never have some sort of protections in place, and they're the most vulnerable because they are the lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And my advice would be is please stop telling yourself that because it's not true.
Yeah.
Isn't true. And, I'm just here to educate truly. And that's what I'm doing. If you ever want to have a conversation with me, please reach out. I'm happy to talk, but I educate first. That's always how I approach this. I'm not looking at this from a sale perspective. Of course, we want to work with you, but I want you to know that I do care about this. It's a mission I'm very passionate about. And I want to be sure people are protected because I do not want your organization to fall victim to a cyber attack or financial fraud that puts your business at risk and all the people who work for you at risk. I do not want that for you.
Yeah. Awesome. So, Brian, I appreciate it. Exceed cybersecurity and IT services. So you mentioned the customers. What areas do you operate in, and how could someone get in touch with you and your team? What's the process if they do want to reach out?
Thank you for asking. So, yeah, website is pretty simple. It's exceedcyber.io is the website, and my email is very simply Brian with an I, Brian at exceedcyber.io. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can send a carrier pigeon.
Okay. All right. And you
Had to throw in a joke there.
operate in DC, Maryland, Virginia. What's your area of operation?
So here's what's really cool. We can operate anywhere in the country. Of course, we are based in Frederick, Maryland, where I'm located. We're based in Frederick, Maryland, but we can actually help anybody anywhere in the country. But whether they're in Baltimore, whether they're in Towson, whether they're in Frederick, DC, Northern Virginia, it doesn't really matter. Even if they're in other parts of the country, we can help. Because typically cybersecurity services don't require an on-site component generally, so we can help you anywhere you are. But always, if you work with us or someone else, always start with the risk assessment. That's how it begins.
Perfect.
That's how you know where to start because prescription without diagnosis is malpractice.
Okay. Awesome. Well, Brian, Exceed Cybersecurity and IT Services, we really appreciate the time, and we look forward to hopefully connecting again in the future. So,
Thanks so much for having me.
absolutely.
Appreciate it.